Hi, everyone. I'm Bolton.
And I'm Grace.
And welcome to Crime Scenes, a true crime movie podcast.
Today we have a special bonus episode from the podcast Watching Netflix Without You. In this episode, we talk with host Heather about the Netflix true crime documentary, Murder by the Coast.
And we will be back next time with our usual episodes featuring the movie Drew Peterson, Untouchable. And as always, if you would like to make a request, you can do so by sending us a DM through any of our social media accounts. We are at Crime Scenes Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can also make a movie request on our website, crimescenespodcast.com. Enjoy, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to another movie review podcast. I'm Heather, and I'm on a mission to watch as many Netflix original films and documentaries as I possibly can. Rate them, review them, and discuss them. Which, of course, does mean spoilers ahead. But don't worry, that part's not until the second half of the episode. So join me and my assortment of delightful guests as we pick these films apart and put them back together again. This is Watching Netflix Without You. Welcome to another episode of Watching Netflix Without You. I am super excited about my guests today. I have two. It is Grace and Bolton from the Crime Scenes podcast. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I thought we'd start. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about your podcast, which, by the way, I absolutely love, and I love the concept of. I thought it was so clever. But why don't you tell everybody about that a little bit?
Yeah. So our podcast is called Crime Scenes, a true crime movie podcast. And what we do is we watch movies that are based on true crimes. We will recap the movie, kind of giving what happens in it, but we also will go through the actual crime and things that the movie leaves out, some things that the movie adds in that's just kind of Hollywood drama that didn't really happen. And we both happen to be attorneys, so we'll also talk about some of the legal stuff going on and why people might have done what they chose to do from the legal perspective.
Awesome. And if I may ask, what inspired you to do your podcast?
Well, we both, so like I said, Grace and I were both attorneys. We actually went to undergrad together, and we both ended up going to law school, different law schools. And I had been working for about 4 years, and I was getting really burnt out of it. So I was taking a little break, and I kind of came up with the idea, and Grace and I had talked about making a podcast before that. So I had asked her if she would be interested in it. We sort of came up with the idea ourselves because we both also are big movie buffs. And we thought it would be a good incorporation of both things.
Awesome. Yeah, we both happened to get burnt out from our current jobs at about the same time. And so then we were able to just get into something creative and fun. And it's been really cool so far.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Well, definitely check out that podcast. I will link in the show notes of this episode so you can go right over there and listen to that incredibly good podcast. I mean it. I really love your podcast, guys.
Thanks.
So for this podcast, Watching Netflix Without You, we are going to be talking about the Netflix documentary Murder by the Coast. This is a 2021 film. It is 1 hour and 28 minutes long. It is a Spanish documentary. It's described by Netflix as investigative and dark. It has a maturity rating of TV-14 for violence and sexual violence. And the description reads, in 1999, teen Rocio Wanikoff is murdered. Her mother's ex-partner, Dolores Vasquez, is suspected. Did she do it? A second victim reveals the truth. All right. So, initial thoughts, Bolton, about this movie.
Oh, the story itself's really interesting, but the documentary itself, I kind of I'm a half thumb to a thumbs down on.
Okay. And why would you say that?
I think, and we'll get into it, I'm sure. I sort of think that this documentary mirrors the whole investigation, and that to me, in a sense, sort of sloppily put together. I think they miss a lot of points. Like, I remember watching the movie and I immediately having questions and being like, are they not going to tell us this? Like, why are we skipping over this? And it could just be because they couldn't get that information out of anybody. But I have the sense that maybe they did know that, but they were trying to lead it in a very specific direction. I also think that they didn't really know what they wanted to focus on. Did they want to focus on Dolores, the partner of the mother, or some of the other people that were involved, which kind of made it a little bit all over the place or even in pieces? Like, maybe it would have been a better, like, limited series to focus on each story more individually.
I would agree with that statement for sure. What about you, Grace?
I think it gets a thumbs up, but I get the... I thought it seemed like almost slow, but there was a lot happening. So it was kind of like, it seemed like it wasn't extremely entertaining the way it was put together, but the story was so interesting that overall I liked it when I was done.
Yeah, I agree with both those statements. I do find it that it was interesting. And I thought that, they Hollywooded it. That's what they do. They go, here's the story we want to tell. And that's the story they tell. And okay, but then people who are like, I think we're all three of us similar in this regard. You go, well, what about blah? What about blah? Wait a minute, didn't they blah, blah? You know what I'll do? My brother does this because he's on a lot of these episodes with me. It's a side thumb, like 45-degree angle to an up thumb for me right there. You guys can see.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. We want to dive into some deeper details. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This is a spoiler alert. I repeat, this is a spoiler alert.
And we're back. Okay, Bolton, I really want to hear from you first because I want to see because you're the defense attorney experienced person. So I want to hear your take first to see if I thought what you thought.
Oh gosh. Well, okay. I just found, so many things I had in my head as I was, kind of taking notes on this. First of all, the lack of detail, and this could have just been the documentary, but I wanted to know, who are the friends that she was with the night that she disappeared? And we see one friend that's a guy, and he says she just didn't show up. We hear about a boyfriend, but we don't know, was she at the boyfriend's house? We don't really get confirmation on that. When they start looking for her, it appears that only her mom realizes she's missing, and she sees a bunch of blood, but we don't ever hear, where is this blood? Where is it in relation to this fair? Where is it in relation to the boyfriend's house? The first thing I'm thinking is, like, who is she connected to that this would be near? And I'm wondering, how soon did they determine that was her blood versus somebody else's? Because, you could have two people missing. And that could also influence maybe why she was missing.
It like just to comment on that sorry to cut you off there, but they also found her shoe, right? So I had kind of the same thing. I was like, well, okay, they found her shoe, so they're assuming it's her blood. Not necessarily an off the wall assumption, but you're right. They don't tell us that they tested it to verify or anything like that. And I had this thought so many times because when they finally find the guy whose DNA matches the cigarette butt and the other murder, I was like, there's no way this guy only did two. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, right.
There's no way. There's more. So I think you have a good point there completely. Sorry.
Right. No, that's okay. And other things that I thought was, so they find the cigarette butt, and it has, I believe at that time, if I remember correctly, they did determine it was male DNA on this. So by the time we get to Dolores, there's nothing indicating a woman was at this scene. The detective and the information they were giving, this could have been because they didn't want to reveal too much, but he would say things and I was like, thank you, Captain Obvious. Like, he was like, we determined that there was an assault that resulted in a lot of blood. And I really wanted to know, how did he determine that he says at one point it came from the nose and the mouth? Well, how did he figure that out? And they talk about how there was various trails that ultimately led to car tracks. Did they determine what kind of wheels were on that car? I had a lot of questions about those details and then how they ended up finding her. Big issue with their determination as to whether or not a sexual assault occurred. They say that they find this body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it wasn't sexual assault. Do. I'm like, did you test anything? Did you check? Like, sorry.
I almost lost my mind at that part.
Yeah.
They say her body was posed in a position where her legs appeared to be spread, but they were too wide, so it couldn't have been a sexual assault. Like it was almost like one of those things where someone says like a woman needs to dress sexy, but if it's too sexy, then you're like, you're considered like, like being promiscuous. That's like the thing I got from it. So I was just like, where is this logic coming from? And then when they ultimately get to, I will say, I mean, I'm sure stories go around about everybody, so I can see something being built up in the media. Oh, there was a woman stabbing a picture, but there is nothing to merit that story at all. The way that they ultimately determine that Dolores was involved is someone saw her stabbing a poster of this missing woman. And I was shocked that even came into the case. I found it really interesting, and I wanted to look into a little more about Spanish courts, because it seemed like a lot of things that would not be allowed in a U.S. court were allowed in. Particularly that at the end, you see Dolores giving her own closing argument, which I found interesting. And the media was just allowed to ask questions in the courtroom, which I also found interesting.
Yeah, it was quite different than what we're used to here in the States. And like the witch hunt nature of it, how people would just line the streets screaming at her that she was a murderer. Like, I'm not going to say that's never happened here, but I was like, I mean, I get the media likes to sometimes really throw somebody under the bus, but I don't stand out there lining the street like, like, it was very 1700s feeling the way that it all went down,
Right. And when they convicted her, they said that they were announcing the verdict by majority verdict, which I thought was, just another difference. They didn't say it was a unanimous verdict.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I may or may not. I need more information to know if that would be a good idea or not. But the thing that killed me was how she didn't get acquitted when literally none of the forensic evidence could be matched to her. They couldn't match the tire track to her car. The DNA didn't match. She had a solid alibi for the entire time that Rocio was missing. I was so floored that she was convicted after that. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was shocking. I had another point. I can't remember what it is.
I'm sorry. I get really excited when people agree with me and I cut them off and I talk over them. And I should not do that. That's not good for podcasting. Well, I have a bunch of notes. Let me go through. Maybe you'll be reminded of the point that you wanted to make. Okay, so, I mean, slightly different topic. I feel like the Spanish media really tiptoed around the point that these women were a couple at one point.
Yes,
they were just like, they were friends. I was like, just say it. Just say it. You don't have to tiptoe around.
They really did. And I'm not sure. I couldn't figure out why they did that. Like at some point they come out and they say that they were an intimate couple.
Yeah.
And the thing that I don't understand how this just seemed to blow past everyone. That was another thing about the documentary I really questioned. I was like, it makes it seem like the people in Spain just were not, was it just so, once the media was so one-sided, they were only getting a little bit of it? Or was it really like this? Because I was like, she was essentially her stepmom and helped raise her. And they had been broken up for 4 years.
Yes.
Even the mom in an interview says, I loved her more than anybody I'd ever loved. I was shocked when I heard this. And I really felt like the mom, I felt terrible for that mother. I can't imagine.
Course,
I've never had anything happen to me like that. But that mom, I feel bad in the sense that I feel like she really got sucked into that, what the media was saying.
Yeah.
At the, I think at some point she really convinces herself she thinks Dolores did it. And I think it was really hard for her to come to terms when it was starting to be revealed that something else might have happened.
Yeah.
Even towards the end. And on the one hand, I felt so bad. I mean, she lost her daughter. But on the other, I was like, you got to wake up. You need to see that she didn't do anything.
Yeah, and to that point, I tell you what, when they had all that media footage when they were looking for Rocio, and you could see Dolores in that footage, and that grief looked very genuine to me. She looked genuinely upset and worried. At least that's how I took it. And to that point, another thing to that point, when they say, oh, well, her whole motive was because Rocio was keeping her from the mom. I hate that I can't remember her name, but Rocio's mother, right? Yes. I said, well, if that was her motive, there's more. She has several children.
Right.
You know, it doesn't ring true as a motive, especially after 4 years of this relationship being over. So that is a really good point.
Yeah. I mean, even the research that they used in this psychological profile of Dolores was really ridiculous. Like, it was really bad.
Yeah,
I would have liked to hear more. I wanted to hear a cop or an investigator that wrote that come to their reasoning of where they got this information, because it essentially said that she was a suppressed homosexual, and she showed it literally called it homosexual aggression. There were parts of the report they show that kept referring to her as the homosexual, not even the suspect, the homosexual. And I was just like, that was shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. It was certainly a witch hunt.
Yeah. I think I out loud gasped at that point. I was just like, stop. And here's the thing. This was 1999. 1999. It wasn't the Dark Ages. Late 90s, early 2000s. Like, Spain, let's hope they've caught up by now. That's all I'll say about that. Let's move on to the unfortunate second murder that happened. Sonia. And I was really happy with the Cohen. I just want to call it Cohen because it's spelled like that. I think it's Cohen investigators. I think they did a good job on their investigation. Yeah,
I have in my notes the Cohen investigators did everything the other city did not, which was their job.
Exactly. And it was, my heart broke when they were interviewing Sonia's mother, and she said if they had done their job the first time around on Rocio's murder, Sonia would never have died. And I'll add to that probably a few other people we don't know about, unfortunately, out there as well. So I was like, I agree with you completely. Through my sobbing tears, I get really emotional when they interview the mothers. I really, really do.
And I thought they did a better job. This is where I say that I feel like the documentary was inconsistent. I loved seeing the home videos and photos of, oh my God, Sonia. Thank you. I loved seeing. I loved hearing her mom talk about her, and she looked like she was just a pretty little girl.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Rocio was the same way as with everybody, but we just didn't get that background on Rocio, and I don't really know why. I think it was just the way the documentary was made. But I think it would have been much more impactful on all sides if we had gotten a little more of that from everybody.
Sure. Well, I will say this about that. When they opened the documentary, they had a group of her close friends there reminiscing about her. And I did like that. It reminded me of sitting down and chatting with my old friends and reminiscing about the old days, So I wonder if they just didn't have the photos or the videos and stuff. I mean, I grew up 80s, 90s, so we have 0 home videos from my childhood, and we have a few photo albums. It just wasn't a thing like it is now. So I suppose that could have been the case. Since we've been ripping them apart, I'll say something in their defense.
True.
On the point that we think... I agree with you that I think that there was definitely more assaults, at least, that were never reported. Probably other murders that this guy did. One weird thing that was brought up, but then never discussed, was the fact that there was a fair in town for both of these murders. And so I was expecting there to be some sort of angle where we're investigating people at the fair, or did this guy look for fairs because then groups of young people would be out alone. It was just a weird red herring, I guess, but that kind of threw me off.
No, you're right. And that just speaks to the point Bolton was making earlier, which is there's a lot of missing information, and it could be the way they cut the documentary or for entertainment purposes, or they didn't think that was, it doesn't mean the police didn't look into that as a line of inquiry,
right?
But they don't bring that to us in the documentary, which is, you know what? It should have been a series, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
I think it should have, because I think there was a lot of things. For example, with Sonia, we get her friends telling her mom, we left her at the door. And so we clearly see from the evidence and from her friends, there was blood on the dad's car. Her purse and her shoes and her phone were 3 houses down, they'd been thrown. There was also blood. So we know something clearly happened where she was attacked. With Rocio, we don't really get that. We just get a pool of blood that we're assuming is hers because her shoes are right there, but nothing really more. I really wanted to, I wish we could have seen those connections more, because even the fair thing, they don't outright say, we just noticed that both of these happened at like a fair with a young girl leaving. So
tell you what, we should have made the documentary. That's what. Yeah.
I know. I'm giving a lot of criticisms of like, they should have done this, but then I'm sure someone making this would be like, okay, you go do it. And be like, well, never mind.
Well, we've covered like the main points that I had written down. Do you guys want to leave any closing statement, any other information or opinions?
I guess one thing I thought was really interesting was like the fact that this guy had a criminal history in London of assaults against women and had done a lot of time in prison. And then he basically ran away to Spain, and people were mad because London or Interpol had alerted the Spanish authorities that this guy was there. But I thought it was, I don't know, just like eye-opening that the Spanish authorities were like, we get so many of these faxes like every day that there's people here. So like just kind of realizing, I guess it just seems easier to run away than I thought it would be from authorities.
Sure,
like if you're wanted somewhere else in Europe and then you can get away to another country, like the chances of them really looking for you seem slim, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they're kind of a disadvantage in Europe too, because they have a lot of very small countries close together.
Right.
And I don't know what country to country the immigration policies are. You know, if it's just open borders everywhere, that does make it really easy for a criminal to not to get into an immigration discussion. Oh my God, like 3 claps, edit that out. We won't get into that. But, yeah, no, that is a good point. Like he's just like, oh, I'm just going to Spain. I'm going to here. I'll get away from these charges.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that too. I was actually, well, I won't ask that question. I wasn't totally sure if they knew he was in Spain immediately after the attack of that young woman in England, or if it was later, but
I think it was later, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of missing the timeline there a bit. That was not explained well.
But I did actually, I will say the end, I started appreciating what they were trying to do more towards the end. When you kind of hear a combination of all of these women speaking, you hear from this woman in England that was attacked that ended up calling into that TV show saying, oh no, I know who he is. He attacked me, as well as his wife. We hear from his wife talking about how she had no clue. And that actually was probably the thing that I don't know why tugged at my heartstrings the most, when she starts to cry saying, I did not know this was happening. I'm so sorry this happened. I didn't know. And you kind of see that a lot, this was just a like losing battle for women on a lot of different sides. These 2 young girls that were killed, and one of them could have easily been prevented if the investigation was better. If Interpol had intervened sooner, then maybe even that first murder wouldn't have happened. This young woman that was a singer in England, if they had been able to find him there, you see how he just got away with so much. And it's hard to see who's at fault. But then, of course, they do call out, and I appreciated this, that no one wants to take responsibility for this. Absolutely nobody does. It's no one's fault.
Yeah.
That's rough. Well, at the end of the day, I guess the good news is they did catch the guy, and he is in prison. So a lot of the road getting there was not smooth and was not great. But I'll just peter out on that.
It was nice to have a true crime that had, and then in the end we got the guy. Because I feel like so many of them that I watch, it's just kind of like all of this horrible stuff happened and we're still looking for the person, or this person might have been wrongfully convicted, but we don't have anything to get them out of jail yet. So this was like, it was a nice wrap up at the end.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Well, I guess that's all she wrote. I'm gonna detract my 45-degree angle. We're gonna go back down to just straight side thumb for me after that discussion.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.